to small particles and then be used in brick making. You are recycling, you're making the environment clean, but also creating employment opportunities. So what I want us to do is, when we innovate, let us understand what our environment looks like. What do our communities need? And how can innovation assist? Because as long as you come with a solution, you are going to get somebody who comes for that solution, and that's how economies grow. Sometimes you actually make people realize the problems they don't have. I'm just pleased that some of the colleagues here from the CSIR that are here are quite involved in the area that we call indigenous knowledge systems. How do you wait as Zululand University for someone to come and do research on Madumbe and tell you what it can and what it can't do? And market it. And make a lot of money and get rich out of it. And you are sitting here, you are doing research on rice. Or you are doing research on something else that is completely not here. And this is quite important because, for example, in the area of health, do you know that the reason why a lot of breast cancer drugs don't actually work in Africa? Okay, you don't know. It is because the research that is done hasn't been done with African women in mind. In the following way, in the sense that when they do that research, when they do clinical trials, those clinical trials will be done in the US, in Europe, and in other places. So when they are able to find a drug that targets the right area and the right aspect, in most cases you find that genetically it doesn't cover our diverse genomic makeup, because what we can tell you for free is that our genomic makeup is very, very diverse as Africa. Even South Africa alone, to an extent that we can actually tell you that if you are able to develop any drug or medicine on the basis of it being effective in Africa, you probably have saved the whole world because of how. So the clinical trials were done somewhere, and now you buy those expensive drugs, you are suffering, they don't work, and you think the medicine doesn't work. The medicine was never developed for your genome. That's where precision medicine comes in. How do we make sure that when we do research, we then say our subjects are going to be these people that we are saving around us? This is so important because healing is not about, it's not a generic thing. There are generic things that medicine can do. That's why I can drink Panadol and get well, and you can drink Panadol and get side effects, is because genomically we're differently made. But research can help us to find out that kind of relevance. One of the African crops in terms of food security that is not being researched and not, but it is very nutritious, very resistant to drought, and is sorghum. And people think that maize is South African or African. It is not. It is Mexican and in other places like those, but not African. But we have adopted it. We're very proud we eat pap. But the problem is some of these things and the tolerance that we have for wheat and stuff talk to the kind of genomic makeup. But if we research our own foodstuffs and begin to consume them, we are able also to deal with all sorts of other diseases that we are acquiring because of the food that doesn't align with our genomic makeup. So we rely on universities to bring in knowledge, and that knowledge must flow between us as a university, between communities, between industry as well. So that even our industry, when they produce food and they sell food, we know that our food is properly researched. We know that this particular food that we're selling is rich in A, B, C, D. And that is what CISPET and others will probably talk about in terms of the work that they do. Lastly, as I really conclude, there's two crops that are very, very crucial. And one of them is not indigenous, but people like to think that it is indigenous. That's moringa. They call it a miracle plant because of what it has and what it can do. And the other one is cannabis. A couple of years back, I went to a conference internationally, and I found that universities from Israel and Europe and so on, they're doing a lot of research in cannabis. But guess where they were getting their research material? It was not from Europe, it was not from Israel. And after they've done that research, they are going to even research how to plant it in their backyard where it normally wouldn't grow. And it's very easy to do that. You just construct tunnels, create the environment and make that environment to be like Zululand environment. And this thing will grow, and they will extract this thing and sell it to us at an extremely high price. And the question is, why couldn't we do research on these things? So the goal that we sit with in terms of our own context and environment is here. But we are looking elsewhere for solutions because we don't want to grow our own timber and start to do our own things. In terms of various support instruments, we will see how we can work together to support those that are being supported, whether it is through, we are establishing a lot of what we call living labs, which are spaces for young people to go and be creative. Here in KZN, we've got things such as Innovate Durban. We're establishing all sorts of centers, even up to this area. I will just say that I didn't check where we have it in this part of the world. But these are spaces we're creating for young people so that you can go there and think and be creative and innovate. And when you want to get a prototype of sort, then that's where we can say, we'll talk to a particular technology station to assist you. But we have to be doing something. And we have to be thinking about how do we innovate to build our own future. The digitization is the center of everything now in terms of the data we have. How do we make sure that we use our data to support decision making? But even that, the area of artificial intelligence is beginning to get out of hand in terms of people not taking care of the data, sometimes giving it away, and sometimes not even working to curate our own data. And hence there is a lot of exploitation that is happening. You got people that are being recruited to curate data in Kenya and everywhere, being paid peanuts. Venezuela, same thing, and probably is going to come here. The establishment of data centers, but we are not really involved. And what happens is that the data you generate get used to take decisions and to bring about solutions that you never know. And the outcome of that is that we complain about AI bias, ethical issues, because the artificial intelligence is about training the models using the data that is there. And when the data is not there, the model is not going to know. If I go and say the model must write an essay for me in Setswana, there is no data to train any model to do that. So the data is not going to write it. But if I say write it in English, it will. And who is going to be at the center of making sure that artificial intelligence is relevant and context sensitive? It's not going to be somebody sitting in USA or in Europe. It has to be us. So I'm going to stop it at that and say that we've got a challenge to make sure that we work towards this decolonization concept. We think about creating a future, because if you don't create a future, the future happens. And when the future happens, you probably might just be a spectator who will just be receiving the negative impacts of its happenings. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very, very much, Dr. Moefi, for challenging us. Those are great challenges, and also for sharing with us what is really happening in the world. Don't you feel challenged? Can you accept the challenge by giving us a strong clap for our speaker? He has done a very good job by defining decolonizing research. And he has reminded us there is no other university that is well placed with its as a node for African thought, being placed in a very good location at northern KwaZulu-Natal, where we have witnessed so many challenges that have been brought about by the climate change, the waste being carried down to the ocean. And us, as researchers, we need to start rethinking the research that we do. Is it irrelevant, or is it relevant in promoting good science? Is it having an impact to the communities that are surrounding us? Do we have measures for the success? Or do we just, because universities are measured through ranking, and the ranking look upon the issue of publications, but they leave the aspect of the impact. Could our university take that advantage and become a lead in conducting research that make impact to the communities? Can we be intertwined, the university and the community, in doing meaningful research that create jobs, solving problems that entail in terms of the food traditional food that exist? Can we add value into them? Can we do the socio-economy and also above all bring a digital economy by recycling, the use of the recycle to get value? So those are all opening for research that our postgraduates can read into, other than looking for people to do research on us and discuss us. As he has highlighted, that most of the drugs, sometimes they may not work here because we were never included when the clinical trials were being conducted. Recognizing that we have, within the African context, we have very high diversity or genetical diversity, which we should take advantage of. So you have reminded us that we have to do modernization of mining by building on what we know and make use of the smartphone in helping our communities and our farmers in assessing the markets, adding value to what we produce. The university has taken the lead in trying to establish a platform where relevant research could be conducted. You also have challenged us in the aspect of setting a standard on what we produce, in particular our food, in that. Getting onto agro-processing, you highlighted the issue of the sugarcane waste. That gives us opportunities of doing meaningful research. So by adding value, issue of the biogas and biomass, making use of it. So we really need to rethink the challenges that you have brought forward. And we appreciate very much the examples you highlighted, because they cut across all areas of research that we are doing. And you have finally come up on the issue of the use of data. Data is gold, and people do not take use of it seriously. When you talk about the artificial intelligence, it is actually using data to do what it is doing. And to minimize the bias that might be introduced, we have to ensure that our data also is included and it is relevant. So you have brought that as to the core, that the building the models by the AI, we have to get into the race of ensuring it is us that produce that data, not them producing it and bringing issues onto that. We really have taken that, and we have taken note of that, Doc, and postgraduates, I hope you have taken note on that. And with that, let me just open the floor for questions and answers. Please take this advantage and ask as many questions as possible. He's here and he's ready to share with us with the solution and suggestions. The floor is open. Somebody with a microphone? Okay. Who want to go first? Raise up your hand. Let's show how active we are and how inquisitive we are. Questions or comments?
Prof. Njuvo, we have a comment at the back.
Go ahead.
It's a very good morning. My question goes as, I want to check as to, the speaker spoke about decolonizing education, but I want to check how can we really force in the current Eurocentric standard of education to feature in Afrocentric education. The reason why I'm asking this is because he spoke a lot about coming up with independent innovations that speak about Africa in context. So I want to understand that how can we really push in African content into education so that at least we come into the realization of our own African problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to answer that, or we take more questions? Sir? Okay. Any another question so that he can combine in his response?
In addition to the brother's question, I wanted to also ask, a lot of speakers, when we are discussing this option, there is a lot of we must, but the answer is supposed to come from us. So there is a bit of a savior mentality that we are relying upon that must come and help us. So in my phrasing of the question, I really wanted to know who is supposed to spearhead this direction of decolonizing Africa. Who is the responsible party that we should be asking questions to or relying these answers from? Thank you.
Thank you. And those online, please post your questions on the chat, and we will ask them to be answered also. Okay.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, I want to believe that I was very clever in my approach to this topic, because I didn't say the decolonization of education. I said the decolonization of research and innovation. And those are two very different things, because I appreciated the magnitude of education and qualification system as it is, vis-a-vis what I was talking about. Now, how do we decolonize research and innovation? I've raised a couple of examples, and I'm going to give some more. And some of those things, also tying into the next question, are things that have actually been supported by action and policies. A couple of years back, we decided as a department, we were still called the DST at the time, to start what we call the Indigenous Knowledge Systems Research. It was a program that never existed. So we established it. And the reason why we did was because we wanted to say the biggest challenge around Africa in general is that, firstly, you find that our knowledge was never codified, and two, never researched. And as a result of that, you have so little information about it that you ultimately then conclude that it is inferior. So this program has been running for years, and I am pleased that it is through this program that today, when you walk into a DSCAM or a CLICS, you will find a whole range of new indigenous products that have been produced by local innovators. And we did not just take them from research. We establish research programs, and then we also have innovation programs. That's where we move from knowledge to the actual products. I remember at some point we used to have in ShopRite, out of the 2-minute nodules products, we had flavors that even had indigenous veggies in. So you go in there and you buy these 2-minute nodules, but the flavor was pretty much about an indigenous. So that really is what we are talking about when we say we have to decolonize. Because if we don't do that, we then sit with a lot of And part of the research that was done then, it was just looking at how nutritious are some of the traditional foodstuffs that we ate. And we discovered that a hell lot of them were very nutritious. But in our own minds, me as a rural boy, I would move out of the village and be in the suburb and think that I'm so advanced that I'm never going to touch the veggies that I grew up eating or the food that I grew up eating. Until you reach a point where you decolonize yourself and say, wait a minute, what was it in those veggies that, for example, makes our old people to live as long as they do? And that's why I like very much this Indigenous Knowledge Innovation Program, because I think for me it has grounded us. And now, when you start to see where the world is actually converging, it's a 360 turnaround, where a lot of people are beginning to say natural products are actually the way to go. And I think that the indigenous knowledge research has done a lot. We've done the same thing in the health space. For example, during COVID, South Africa was leading the research around looking at traditional research to look at medicines that could actually be used. We were able to develop protocols for the World Health Organization to look into those things. So that actually is decolonization. So it is not about, on the question of who is going to do it, it's everybody. Some people need to take leadership. And on the basis of their leadership, they become role models. And as time goes on, we begin to move into a world where it becomes so natural for a young person growing up to know that when I eat something that is traditional, or when I research about how we used to do farming, how we used to do mining, because by the way, mining is not new. When you go back into history, you realize that indigenous people were making implements from iron ore and stuff like that. They were mining. But how did they do it in a manner that it didn't create havoc to the environment? How did people plant in a manner that erosion was actually also managed? One aspect around agriculture that is now becoming to be an area of focus is what we call crop rotation, one, and two, multi-cropping. When you grew up, you may have found that the elderly will plant maize and also plant groundnuts, or they will also plant beans. Now, that is actually very scientific, in the sense that when you've got maize and you've got groundnuts or whatever sort of nuts or whatever sort of legumes, that scientifically those legumes do what we call nitrogen fixation. They are able to grab nitrogen from the atmosphere and convert it into fertilizers. So that means when they are growing next to the maize, they actually also help fertilize the maize. But without that scientific research, we would think that, yeah, you know, we are so advanced agriculturally, we just want to grow maize here. And after years of growing maize only, the soil becomes infertile and maize can't grow. And that is really the thing that we're saying about the decolonization is about revisiting some of the ways in which things were done and then saying, scientifically, did they actually have a message? And in most cases, you find that there is a message, because they might not have been doing science as we know it in the lab, but they were practicing and observing over time to a point that they even know how to use the best breed to select for planting next season. That's decolonization. And it is for both for all of us to begin to look at. So I just hope that this answers you. So that's why in government now, some of the programs that I didn't speak to you about is a big program that we call grassroots innovation, where we are now, instead of just looking at universities, we are saying, let's go to the townships and the villages and say, what is it that people are innovating around? And then when we see that they might need partnership with universities, we bring universities, we give them funding to do that. And every year we also host what we call Grassroots Innovation Awards. What aspect of decolonization is that? It is to then say, innovation is not only happening at university or at a TVET college, but it is actually happening in a community where old people used to make ethanol. Where I was growing up, there used to be this very strong alcohol. These old people will literally make a chemical plant where they will mix sugar and this and that, and they will make alcohol which is like 80-90% alcohol. And you don't call that a chemical plant because you are colonized. And those are some of the things that, how do we research those things and begin to say, can we actually bring them mainstream as part of our thinking around decolonization? So I deliberately talk about decolonization of innovation and research and not of education, because I think the inertia around education is going to be pretty much like a Titanic, but it will happen. And it is starting to happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm wondering whether we have questions on the online. None. Without silence, it means that we are all satisfied. Ruggiero, are you saying there is a question? None. Okay. Those online, just post your questions or comments.
Okay, good morning. I would like to thank Dr. Mofwe for this powerful presentation. I'm from the CSIR myself, and some of the points that is touched on have really touched me, particularly looking at our environment and how we can do research that is relevant to our environment. Just a week ago, I visited this plant where they are packaging eggs actually, and then some of them are broken. Then those broken eggs, they use it for liquid egg, and then the rest of the shell, they just throw it away. And there's an SMME who is interested in using those shells because she sees potential. It's high in calcium. It's also high in some protein that is beneficial to our joints. We know that as we grow older, we need calcium. And for me, this particular presentation by Dr. Mofwe actually brings home a lot of things that we tend to ignore. And the grassroots innovations program also involves our communities as well. I've interacted with grassroots innovators. You know that we have our indigenous fermented beverage, amaheu, omtoho. For years, people will be saying, but why would one visit someone who is very sick in hospital and take them amaheu? They are not nutritious. But now we know more about what maheu is high in. It is high in probiotics, which actually help with healing. And those probiotics, those are gut microbiomes that contribute to even reducing the occurrence of diabetes and boost our immunity. So, yeah, so thank you very much for that.
Thank you for that comment. Any other? There is a question here.
Thank you. Thank you to our speaker, Dr. Mofwe. I'm Hlengiwe. I'm from microbiology and biochemistry of this institution. And the things that you spoke about, actually, it's as if you were talking directly to my department, because the majority of the things you mentioned are actually being happening there. We just started, yes, but we are definitely, looking into some of the things that you mentioned. And I especially enjoyed the part where you talked about how one person can take paracetamol and it works for them and then not for the other person. And that happens to actually be the study I did for my PhD. And so I was like, okay, so basically today you came in and you actually were speaking to what I'm actually currently doing. And as for Amadume, I'm sure Consumer Sciences is doing something in there, because they are already doing something about imifino and especially imbuya. So we will get there, slowly but surely. But all we need is, of course, chang. Because as long as we have money, we will be able to actually do a lot more research. And as such, if the Department of Science is actually assisting us with this, definitely we will be producing more and more findings, and as such, knowing a lot more about what we've been actually using indigenously before. So thank you for that.
Can I just make a comment about microbiology? So by the way, if I was talking to you, I probably brought the pastoral tendencies that I have as well. But microbiology, this is one of the biggest gold fields that we're sitting on. We haven't scratched the surface in terms of just understanding the kinds of microbes that are useful to humans. In terms of studying them, we haven't scratched the surface. In fact, some are even looking at those microbes that might actually be in the oceans, doing a study on them in terms of what is it that they can do medically, health-wise, and in terms of food production, which is why you actually have a lot of them also being used in mining, because they can eat up things there and free a lot of minerals. So I don't know if people know what, when we talk about inventions of the future, will probably be what microbes can actually do for us. Because, by the way, as human beings, we are hosted by the microbes. So if you think you are it, you are the man. There is a magnitude, I don't know how many times, of microbes in you more than your own cells. So your cells are just minuscule compared to the number of microbes that you are hosting. And when you understand these things, then it's going to make us, I think, crack what is it about us, how can we live longer, how can we be healthy, and so on and so forth.
That's very, very powerful. Thank you so much. It now seems that all our postgraduates, you have a way of finding areas to do research on. And we are very grateful, Doc, for all the sharing your experience and that great information. Did we have a burning questions before we break for tea? A comment. Do we have a comment that side? Oh, I see. Okay. Maybe you can start there for those who are online. Yeah.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, I just want to speak, maybe one will say in defense of the humanities. I'm coming from the creative arts space. So I'm reminded about by the comment, the example that you made, Doc, that while the young man in China is creating an app, and the young man in South Africa will be busy dancing. So I just want to say, with my dancing, you know, while my counterpart in China is creating an app, I will also be curating a dance routine for the elderly, for an example, which then I can register as a creative output with the Department of Higher Education and Training and attract a subsidy for the university, and also register it as an intellectual property, you know, for getting those rights and royalties in a way of monetizing the dance. Thank you so much.
Thank you for bringing that dimension. Is there a question? Can you proceed?
There's a comment, Prof, actually two on the chat. One is from Zandile Ngobo. She says, thank you so much for touching on the chemical plant innovation aspect, as many speakers tend to focus more on agricultural research. And then another one is from Alukanyo, who says, not a question, just a comment. I find it interesting how many of us now reject the very foods that once sustained our families. One will say that I will never eat amadumbe, for example, because they ate them every day as a kid. I see now that here is a trend on social media that even labels these foods as poverty meals, yet those same dishes are rich in nutrition and culture. I think part of decolonizing our diets is also about decolonizing our minds and recognizing the value and wisdom in indigenous foods, rather than viewing them through the lens of social status or Western influence. And then there's a question again from Lungisi Tusi, who says, does our institution have a monitoring mechanism in place to track and assess the career progression and impact of our graduates after they leave the university, particularly those involved in projects with the potential to create employment opportunities?
Those online, we thank you for the comments and for the question regarding the monitoring. Perhaps maybe Deputy Director, do you wish to address to that, or we just leave it up? Could you repeat the question? Does our institution have a monitoring mechanism in place to track and assess the career progression and the impact of our graduates after they leave the university, particularly those involved in projects with the potential to create employment opportunities?
Okay, thank you, Lungi, for that question. Well, currently I will say we rely more in working with our alumni, because we have a structure where we work together with alumni in terms of checking them where they are, but I wouldn't say it is structured or it is formalized. So I wouldn't say it is a framework, but then we are able to actually contact them using, for instance, our convocation, because our alumni, they are actually aligned with the convocation, and that's where we are communicating with them, even when it comes to the funding or the support that we are getting from other people who were our alumni and they are now successful business people. It is through the convocation. So that's what I can say for now. Otherwise, we do not have the framework, a structured framework per se. Thank you, Program Director.
Thank you for that response. It's a quick question, comment?
Good morning to everyone, and I am a postgrad student in the humanities and social sciences. And I mean, I feel a little left out when, you know, there's a lot of emphasis on STEM. And I'm just wondering, how do you begin to kind of talk on a convergence between the STEM focus and the human capital type of research. Because I truly believe that when you talk about decolonization, you begin to talk about social systems, you begin to talk about cultural production systems, you begin to also talk about philosophical understandings, and you begin to talk about the word just flew out my mind. But those are very deeply rooted in humanities, and where do you begin then? Especially from a psychological point of view, because the decolonization has to happen psychologically as well, and not, with only the things we yes, daily things, yes, it's necessary with the food we eat, those are daily things. So when do you begin then to fit the humanities in this whole understanding of innovation and the decolonization as you've shared? I'm struggling to locate myself in as a person in the humanities and social sciences. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You want to respond?
Thanks very much. All the questions that have been asked are very important and relevant. But if I were to rank the questions, I will rank this the highest. Because this is the question. Decolonization is really about dealing with those things that have been so much part of us that sometimes we don't even feel them. And this is very important, because what we have started to do, one of the entities of the Department of Science, Technology, and Innovation is the HSRC, Human Sciences Research Council, and I'm pleased that it's one of the entities that, in addition to the CSIR, I've got an oversight over. So what we have decided now with the implementation of the latest strategy is that there isn't going to be any research of importance that we'll consider without the humanities aspect. We are implementing research, for example, in what we call the foundational digital capabilities. We talk about artificial intelligence, blockchain, cyber security, and everything. And we intentionally put aside also a couple of millions of rands for research that brings about the human and social aspect. Because the attitudes and even the uptake of technology, or lack thereof, is pretty much informed by these social sciences. I always give an example of a big program. Those of you who know, when you're driving from OR Tambo Airport going into maybe Midrand area, you're going to go on N3. Alexander, there's houses there with a lot of solar panels on top and geysers. I understand they don't work, but anyway, that's a different story. When those were deployed, and they were not deployed in more townships, I think, after that, because people didn't like them. And why didn't people like them? Because they associated them with poverty. So if you got a solar geyser, then it meant I am poor. So, and the service delivery protest will be around, no, we want ESCOM, we want electricity. And when things start to turn and you see, oh, it looks like people in the suburbs are also starting to install solar geysers and solar panels, the whole thing changes. Because now all of a sudden there is a lot more into the solar energy than just the poverty. And we have seen that in the villages as well, where people are saying, all we want is, even if it means that you've got the pole that comes to your house, but you don't have money to buy electricity, but it's there, people feel good. Even if they can just have a panel and they have. So I think the aspect of bringing in the, how do we socialize our communities, even in this innovation? That is why, even when I always advise for those who are doing research to say, you probably are doing research and are going to innovate, but you probably may not be the person who is going to take this into a commercial success. Because for it to be commercial and successful, you need to understand the people that you are selling your stuff to. And you're not going to understand them by saying 100 times 1,000 is, but it's going to come through understanding what kind of attitude, what background do these people have, what do they understand about, how can I then change their thinking? So we must always think about the role of social sciences in everything we do. And in a company, those who fund companies, and I do a lot of funding of smaller enterprises, and we do pitching, this thing called pitching. When people come with their ideas and they say, I'm going to be doing this and this, one of the key things is to look at the kind of the team that they have. And the red flag is when it's going to be all engineers or all scientists. Because all they think about is how much they have fallen in love with the technology. Not how much that technology is acceptable, because some of the technology is good, but it's not acceptable for whatever reason. So you can't be absent in the discussion that we're having around innovation, around entrepreneurship, and around decolonization. That part cannot be complete without the human and social sciences. Thank you.
Thank you very much for responding to that question. It shows the inclusivity of decolonizing the research and education. For more questions, may I request that we carry them on as we are running short of time. Our keynote speaker is still available to answer and to discuss if you have burning questions on that. I want to invite you all for a cup of tea and coffee, and just take a short time as possible, 15 minutes, as we are running short of time. But before you depart for that, please give a rousing clap to our keynote speaker. Most welcome. 15 minutes, we are able back by past. And those online, please join us also, and join us at past. Thank you.